Hello, I'm still not Corey, but I am going to tell you a little bit about virtue signaling. If you don't know, a man named Matt Walsh raised about 100 grand for AOC's grandmother, and actually, this is a bad thing. It is pretty hard to make raising money to help people into a negative thing, and yet Matt Walsh managed to do it. To be fair, it's a little more complex than that. It's not necessarily the raising of the money that was a bad thing. It was like everything surrounding it. If you don't know who Matt Walsh is, don't worry, I don't know either. I think he's some conservative guy. I just saw this whole thing unfolding on Twitter and I thought it was very funny. So AOC tweeted, "Just over a week ago, my abuela fell ill. I went to Puerto Rico to see her. This is her home. Hurricane Maria relief hasn't arrived. Trump blocked the relief money for PR. People are being forced to flee ancestral homes and developers are taking them." And she goes on a whole sort of like Twitter thread about why the Trump administration was responsible for this. She's basically saying, look, help the people of Puerto Rico because the money that was supposed to go to them from the government didn't. And she finishes this off. This is very important. She finishes this off with saying, "And for the record, my abuela is doing okay. It's not about us, but about what's happening to Puerto Ricans across the island. She had a place to go and be cared for. What about the thousands of people who don't?" Now, if you don't have brainworms, you'd read this and think, oh, AOC's grandmother is doing fine. She's just using the house as an example for what is happening to Puerto Ricans across the island, like she said. But Matt Walsh, on the other hand, no. Matt Walsh has a lot to say about this. "Shameful that you live in luxury while allowing your own grandmother to suffer in these squalid conditions." Matt. She said her abuela is doing fine and had a place to be. I think her abuela's fine and has a place to be. Just in case she wasn't clear enough with her tweet clearly saying that her abuela was okay, AOC very kindly responded to Matt Walsh and said, "My abuela is okay, but instead of only caring for mine and letting others suffer, I'm calling attention to the systemic injustices you seem totally fine with in having a US colony." Fair enough response, I think. But don't worry, even though Matt Walsh got the wrong end of the stick initially, he came back 2 days later with an apology and understanding of where he'd gone wrong. No, of course he didn't. Matt Walsh, despite knowing at this point that her abuela was okay, decided to be a very good person and raise money anyway. So he came back to AOC and said, "Hi AOC, we're raising money to help your abuela. It's been inspiring to see the response so far, blah 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 blah." Matt, why are you raising money for someone that is okay? I'll tell you why you're raising money for someone that is okay. Because Matt Walsh wants to make AOC look bad. I don't know whether his reading comprehension is bad or whether he's just flat out lying, because in his tweet announcing the fundraiser, he says, "As you've heard, AOC's abuela is living in a dilapidated home that was ravaged by Hurricane Maria." Now, the Hurricane Maria part is true. The dilapidated home is probably true also. The living in it? AOC said that her grandmother had somewhere safe to be, so making the assumption that she lives there is probably, I don't know if that's true. You don't know if that's true. You're just jumping to conclusions there, so it sounds like AOC is forcing her grandmother to live in those conditions. AOC is unable to help her own grandma for whatever reason, so I've set up this GoFundMe campaign to save her home. Please give if you can. AOC literally said that her grandma was able to get help. There are other reasons that the house may not be fixed. The grandmother might be refusing money from AOC. There might be not enough contractors to get the job done. There might not be enough money to get the supplies in. There's so many different sort of systemic reasons, like AOC pointed out, that could stop the houses from being fixed despite having the money to do so. But instead of looking into any of this, Matt Walsh just decides, I know what I'll do. I'll make a big old campaign to make AOC look bad. Because that makes sense. Raising money to own the libs. I mean, this does bode well. It seems like it's very easy to trick conservatives into having a heart just by making them think that they're dunking on someone whilst doing it. But Matt Walsh wasn't the only one to get involved. Michael Knowles said, "So great to see people stepping up to save AOC's abuela's ancestral home since the wealthy congresswoman can't be bothered to help. $499 from me." And my least favourite Muppet Ben Shapiro also got involved to donate some money. The thing is, again, they're just spinning this narrative that AOC can't be bothered to help, when she said her abuela got help. I sound like a broken record, but these people, they're just overlooking it to make her look bad. That's all they're doing. And you might wonder why it's $499. That's a lot of money and a very specific amount. It also happens to be the amount for a monthly payment for a Tesla. Yeah, because AOC owns a Tesla. If you weren't sure, they are absolutely only doing this to say you to AOC. And in response to Matt's tweet, someone brings up a very good point. What about $499 towards a homeless veteran, or a veteran trying to keep running water and lights for his family, or a veteran family with food inconsistencies, or an unclaimed deceased veteran? See, what's interesting to me is that these people all have the capacity to give away $500 for what amounts to like a bad joke. Why don't you give away the money to something that you believe in, that isn't a smear campaign against AOC? So the Independent ran a headline that said, "Right-wing blogger launches GoFundMe for AOC's Puerto Rico grandmother in latest personal attack." Matt Walsh didn't really seem to like this being labelled as a personal attack, despite that being exactly what it is. If you were just raising money for her grandmother, you wouldn't need to say, oh, because she can't for whatever reason. Oh, because she can't. Just say, we're raising money for Puerto Ricans because we noticed that there's a problem. If you're doing it out of the kindness of your heart and not to attack AOC, just be nice with it. You don't even need to bring AOC in it. You could just raise money for the people of Puerto Rico. But you know that if you tried to just do that, the people that got involved probably wouldn't even bother because they only want to give away their money to make AOC look bad. He said, I committed a personal attack on AOC by raising $100,000 for her impoverished grandmother. This is the equivalent of a kid being forced to apologize and being like, I'm sorry that you're so annoying, and not understanding why that's not the same as an actual apology. Matt, the reason people are saying it's a personal attack is because while you're raising the money, you're personally attacking AOC's character. You know that! Don't play dumb! And then Matt also tweeted this. Was it trolling? Was it a stunt? Was it charitable? Was it proving a point? Was it trying to solve a problem? Was it a sincere attempt to raise money for a cause? Was it mean? Was it nice? Was it hilarious? Yes. Am I now tempted to start a website called Troll Funding for all troll and meme fundraising efforts? Yes, most definitely. You can't be like, oh yeah, I'm raising money to help an impoverished grandmother, and then also be like, oh, I'm doing it because I'm trolling. Like, we all know that you're trolling. That's why they're saying it's a personal attack, because you're trolling. Because you don't actually care about raising money for this woman, because you in doing so, you ignored that AOC said that she was fine. She was okay. Her house is dilapidated, but she's in a place where she is being cared for. You ignored that just so you could do your big stunt and look like, oh, look at me, I'm a nice guy and AOC is awful. You look like an idiot, mate. Honestly, the only point that you've proven is that you and the people that have donated don't really seem to give that much of a shit about actually helping people. You really just care about virtue signaling. You know that thing that you guys always talk about being awful? That's literally what you are doing. You are virtue signaling. Look how good I am. I'm giving away money to AOC's grandmother when she won't help her. Am I not the best? Ha ha ha. Like, come on. He also updated his bio to say theocratic fascist and philanthropist. Do you know what this is like? This is the equivalent of going up to someone on the street and giving them money and filming it and being like, look at me, I'm giving money to the hopeless. And then swinging your camera around and pointing at someone else walking across the street and being like, they are terrible. Look how awful they are, not giving money to this homeless person. And the person you've given the money to is like, dude, I'm not homeless. You just came up to me on the street. That is literally what's happening here. He's saying, oh, her abuela, she's living in dilapidated conditions. AOC doesn't care, when that's literally not at all what AOC said. You know what, fair enough. If AOC was fully just letting your grandmother live in dilapidated conditions and, like, you know, posted that picture online, and if you actually caught her in that would be great. But the fact that you had to completely ignore the facts of the situation just to make this, like, you know, at least somewhat funny is really telling, isn't it? Right, what happened to facts don't care about your feelings? Come on, man. I genuinely can't believe Matt Walsh actually questioning why people are saying that this was a personal attack when he literally said, you make at least 180 grand a year and you have no children or dependents, you can't give your own grandmother enough money to fix her roof and maybe buy some quality furniture? Horrible selfishness on your part. Shameful. See, the horrible selfishness on your part, shameful there, it's a little bit of a personal attack, isn't it? Just a touch. Little bit of a fib in there. You're kind of omitting the fact that her grandmother, as she said, as I've said many times, because it is incredibly obvious, but clearly not to you, her grandmother seems to be fine. There could be other reasons, as I've said, for the house still being in that condition. Systemic reasons, perhaps. Perhaps there's very systemic reasons that AOC pointed out herself in that initial tweet thread. Very unfortunately, Matt Walsh's philanthropic efforts were cut short. He was told by GoFundMe that actually the person that he was raising the money for didn't want it. Here's the message. Dear Matt, we are in touch with the beneficiary's family. They've made it clear they will not be accepting the funds raised. When a beneficiary doesn't want to accept the funds that have been raised on their behalf, it is standard practice to turn off donations, then refund all donors. Here's the thing, when GoFundMe can't give the money to the person that the GoFundMe is for, they basically just give the money back, right? And also, if the person gets the money, they can't then just spend it on whatever. So AOC's family couldn't have just accepted this and distributed it among everyone else. They would have had to use it for what the GoFundMe said it was for. That's pretty much in the terms and conditions of GoFundMe. Otherwise, they would look really bad if you raised a bunch of money for someone on GoFundMe and they just went ahead and, I don't know, like, bought a rocket ship with it. I don't know what people buy. So Matt Walsh said, update, someone in AOC's abuela's family told GoFundMe that she won't take the money, even though AOC previously claimed that her grandma was in dire straits and it was Trump's fault. Again, AOC literally said her grandmother was fine. Where are you getting this from, Matt Walsh? Can you not read? Is that what your problem is? Learn to read, man! Reading comprehension! Oh my god. AOC still hasn't acknowledged this effort or thanked us. Here's the thing, if I was to give you $20, say, it's for your grandmother, and spat in your face at the same time, would you thank me? Is that something that you would do? Because if that happened to me, I don't think I would thank them. Maybe it's rude of me to not thank them for, like, you know, giving me money for my grandmother whilst insulting me, but hey, that's just me. Matt Walsh, you can't play this game. You can't say, oh, I'm trolling. You can't say, I'm doing this because AOC is terrible, and then also try and play it like, but I'm just doing a nice thing. Who are you doing this for? Why are you doing this? It's not making AOC look bad because you're just blatantly lying about the facts of the situation. It just makes you look like a big dummy dumb. Makes you look stupid. Here's another tweet from him. It's pretty fascinating, really. We raised enough to change her grandmother's life. We could have raised enough to lift her whole neighborhood out of poverty. AOC shut it down. She'd rather leave people to suffer than accept help from us. Very revealing episode. Is this why you did that? Is this why you did it? Because bear in mind, when you accept GoFundMe money, you have to use it for what the GoFundMe is for. And also, if you wanted to help these people, why did you set it up as an insult to AOC at the same time? If you cared about actually helping people, this is what's revealing here. If you cared about helping people, you would have completely removed it from AOC. You would have seen, oh man, people in Puerto Rico are in dire straits. There's lots of problems happening. Do you know what I'll do? I'll raise money for it. But no, you decided to do that whilst also making it very clear that you were doing it because you wanted to insult AOC. So, and bear in mind, AOC pointed out the systemic issues at the root cause of all of this. So while 100 grand is a lot of money, and it definitely would have helped a lot of people, which is probably why they should have just raised it for the people of Puerto Rico instead of, you know, making it a smear campaign against AOC. The thing is that money wouldn't solve the systemic issues. So acting like it's the solution to all of the problems is just like, it's not the case. Also isn't the solution to AOC's abuela's problem, clearly, because her abuela seems to be doing fine. Like she said. How many times can I say that in this video? I know I sound like a broken record. I know I keep on mentioning it, but it is just baffling to me that these people continually play on the idea that AOC's grandmother is living in these awful, squalid, horrible conditions when AOC herself said, my grandmother is doing fine. The fact that they just ignore things that are not useful to their narrative. They're just like, oh, AOC's grandmother's fine? But what if she wasn't? Haha, what a terrible person AOC is because her grandmother is not fine. Come on, guys. Like, you're smarter than that. Ben Shapiro, you're definitely probably a little bit smarter than that. Try harder, man. Try harder. This bit is quite funny. Tragically, this charitable effort has been sabotaged by forces outside of our control. Still, I'm grateful for the outpouring of support for Abuela, even if AOC isn't. But questions remain. Why didn't AOC help her own abuela? Why was our help turned down? We are left to speculate. Here's the thing, Matt. You're saying that AOC didn't help her own abuela, but, like, the only evidence that you've got is that she did, because her abuela has someplace safe to be and is doing fine. Right? Like, you don't have any evidence to say she didn't help her abuela. Because again, systemic issues could be the cause of her house being dilapidated, and also, she's living someplace safe. You don't even know that she's living in that house. Why was your help turned down? Well, to be honest, if I had a grandkid and people were running a smear campaign against them by raising a bunch of money for me, I would reject that money too. Why would I take it if it's only being raised as a big you to my grandkid? You're left to speculate. All you've been doing this entire time is speculating and jumping to conclusions and then raising money just to make people look bad. So Lauren Southern, noted white supremacist, chimed in to say, rejecting $100,000 to own the cons? Clearly the proper response here would have been to take it, decorate the completed home with a poster of Mao, take a pic popping a bottle of champagne while thanking everyone for the wealth distribution. Missed opportunity, shaking my head. That actually would have been really funny. Abuela, please, if you can accept the money, listen to Lauren Southern. She has one good take, and it is this. I actually stand corrected. Lauren Southern has 2 entire good takes, despite being an awful white supremacist. Also, giving $100,000 to the libs to own the libs? I'm far too much of an e-boomer for 2021 politics, clearly. Honestly, I think Lauren Southern summed it up really well, which is surprising, because I didn't think I'd agree with such a blatant racist. But seriously, why did you think that raising money for the libs would be a good way to own the libs? You just look like a fool. You look silly, Matt, because you had to lie constantly to even make it seem remotely like a good idea. You just dropped the act of it being out of the kindness of your heart, like halfway through, and just blatantly were like, oh yeah, this is a joke, I'm doing it for the memes, also AOC sucks. But wait, why are people saying I'm only doing this because AOC sucks? Like, come on, bro. If you're gonna do something like this, at least like commit to it. You know, if you're gonna lie, go the whole hog, lie the whole time. What you've done here, it's just stupid. You look silly, man. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and a comment, and also subscribe. And if you very much enjoyed it a lot, you can become a patron over at my Patreon. You can see my patrons. Their names are here. A very special thank you to Renegade, Rachie May, and Sarah. If you would like to have your name read out or to have your name here, like I said, you can become a patron. I'm repeating myself because I forgot what I was going to say. I've just remembered patrons can also get these videos early. They get bonus videos. They also get live streams as well. What lucky people they are. So go ahead and sign up, or you can buy my merch or subscribe to my other channels or follow me on Instagram or Twitter or whatever other social media site exists. It's all in the description. Thank you very much. I think I'm done. Goodbye.